Hello, Mike. We're very pleased to have you here. Thank you for coming, for joining us. Before you set the stage, can you tell us a bit about your professional background?
Yes, I can. I'm a partner with Holland Consulting Group, and what I do as a consultant is help organizations improving their customer performance. So I help them to improve on their processes, structures, etc. And besides that, for about 1 day a week, I'm a PhD candidate researching the deployment of agile within omnichannel operations and the impact that has on customer performance. And I'm also an author, and I like to teach about the things I do in my consultancy practice.
Yeah, okay, great. We selected your book for our students, so that's why we invited you as a speaker. So, you set the stage, and then I'll ask some questions, also bearing in mind what the students will have to do with the help of your book. So, let's see what kind of insights you will give to our students.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. And for setting the stage, I want to go to my first slide. What you of course see is that customer behavior has been changing fundamentally in the last 10 years. Because of the proliferation in online channels, you see that customers are more and more using complex combinations of offline and online channels. That's what you see in the table here, based on a very diverse amount of research. The main conclusion of this is that customer behavior is becoming more complex. And besides that, also that organizations are little capable of drawing the situation for their specific markets. How are their customers combining their channels, and how do they have to architecture their organization to offer those channels in the right combinations. And why is that important? Other research indicates that in this case consumers really appreciate the fact that if they are using multiple channels, they are integrated. So they want to have recognition, uniformity over channels in terms of assortment, pricing, style of communication. And what you also see in this slide is that a very much lower percentage of those consumers are also experiencing that in their practice. And the gap between what they expect and what they experience causes problems, as the result is that they are not satisfied. And customer satisfaction is a very important driver of future customer equity, so the profits you can generate from the customer relationship. So that's an issue and something that organizations have to look thoroughly into. So what organizations really have to reach is what you call a seamless journey. And what you see in this slide is that I use 3 terms for that. It's cross-channel, it's omnichannel, it's multi-channel. And I'm not so much interested in if you use the right terms for the right situation. But the key word is what you see here, integration. And if you look at research again, consumers look at the organization in a holistic way. And that means that they are not interested in the fact that behind the curtains of the organizations you have diverse departments with diverse responsibilities for channels. And while they are not cooperating very well, the consumer sees that their channels also do not cooperate very well. And so what you have to offer is a really integrated experience over channels, what you call a seamless journey. And for that, it's very important for organizations to have their internal cooperations at a professional level. And how can you do that? I'm quoting Einstein here. He of course says, if you want to solve a problem, don't solve the symptoms, but look into what the causing factors are behind it. And if you do that in respect to omnichannel management, you see that you can determined 6 clusters of success factors based on research. We're not going to go very detailed into all of them, but I want to go into the 2 on the left-hand side in the top. That's the voice of customer, customer journey analysis, and of course the processes that have to be used for continuous improvement. Besides that, and I just go briefly into them, you see that information systems are key to be able to follow your customers throughout their journey, the diverse touch points they are using, to get insight in what they are experiencing, but also to offer them the best proposition and experience once they are interacting in the future with a certain touch point. What you also see is that rewarding the people within the channels causes problems, as they are tended to only operate within that channel they are awarded for. For instance, an agent in a call center that does not want to let the customer leave towards the web shop, for instance, as it doesn't bring him any money. And the last 2 ones, you can combine those 2. It's about what I call the turkeys deciding on Christmas dinner. And what I mean by that is that people responsible for a certain channel should not be the ones who decide on budgeting that channel. You should have someone 1 level below, for instance in the board, who oversees the total journey of their customers and knows what the impact is of the different channels within that journey, and use that as a basis for how they design the allocation of their budgets. So to look into that, it's a complex matter, and what you see is that there are very little organizations that have all these success factors in place. I know none, actually. But there are organizations, as you see here, who score very well on the different aspects of those success factors I just mentioned. And well, it's interesting to find out how you can reach that success that they are achieving in this aspect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. One question I have is we chose this subject, customer journey, customer experience management, as the subject, the central subject of this semester. And critics might say that this is just a hype. These marketing professionals, they will have a career of many years, and maybe in 10 years it will be forgotten. What would you say to these critics and this criticism?
Yeah. I understand what you mean. I think that omnichannel indeed is what you could call a buzzword. Everyone using the term for new solutions they have found, but the question is, well, is this really omnichannel? But on the other hand, it is really a subject that has been studied for a long time, only it didn't have the name omnichannel. For instance, let me show you the SurfQual model, which is a very old academic model, but already shows us that it's all about knowing the expectations of your customers and giving them the experience that matches that expectation. And that's in short what omnichannel is about: knowing what your customers expect from you as an organization in how you deploy your channels, how you combine your channels, and giving them the experience that they expect. If you do not do that, as we saw in the research earlier, they will become unsatisfied. So that's something which you could say is of all times, and so it's not a hype. If you do that correctly, it really impacts strongly on the customer equity of your organizations. As you see in this slide, if you are able to offer a really good omnichannel experience, research indicates that you will be able to convert prospects better towards customers, which means that you can get more customers. And if you do so, you also will see the effect that those customers will become more loyal. So you have more time to make money from the relationship you have with them. And thirdly, what you also see is that customers that are showing multi-channel behavior also show that they generate a higher contribution margin for your organization. They buy more often, they buy more expensive products and services, etc. And that makes it very relevant for all organizations, in fact.
Okay, so it has been proven. Research shows that this is something that organizations will have to master in the future.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks. Well, our students, they will have to do research for a real life company, a client, possibly their internship company. And they have to get the assignment to do an omnichannel project. They will have to do some research into the current situation. Well, in your book, you write something about establishing the current situation, thinking about the desired situation. But practically for our students, how can they research the current situation? Do you have some clues or tips for our students?
Yeah, I do. Well, that's something I do in my consultancy work as well. I always look at the East and the Seoul situation, so current and future, and what are the impediments to reach the future situation. And how can you do that? Well, actually very simple, by using what they call within the lean approach the voice of customer. And voice of customer actually is using all the sources available to get to know more about your customers, their needs, their behavior in relation to channels. And what you really have to be aware of if you are deploying the voice of customer is people not always do what they say and do not always say what they do. And later on you will be seeing that in the neurological marketing presentation. But most organizations, in my experience, they invest in surveys, in interviews, in focus groups. And that's all based on the presumption that people do what they say and say what they do. But you should use triangulation there. So add other sources of information to also look at the actual behavior that customers are showing you and learn from that, because that's the best predictor for their future behavior. And you can see that here you have different sources you can use. And the best sources actually, in my experience, are what you call passive research sources. And that means that the customers are not aware of the fact that they are being researched, and therefore they are showing their most pure behavior. And that's the best predictor for their future behavior. And I can give you a short checklist on that. Besides the interviews and the focus groups and the surveys I just mentioned, the sources you see here are really very practical and usable for your own investigation. For instance, you can learn really a lot from complaints that our customers are giving through to the organization. And my experience, most organizations really neglect the chances complaints offer to improve on their channel usage or improvements on products and services. But you can also look into search terms being used, or click behavior on their website, or what they are mentioning on social media, or just do some co-listening in the contact center or whatever. And a nice example of that is, for instance, what Nike is doing, observing the actual behavior of their customers. If you are customizing a Nike ID shoe, well, probably you think as a customer, well, that's nice for me, and it's a good brand experience. You pay some more for a shoe, and you can design it in 10 different aspects, putting on your name, etc. But what's in it for Nike actually is that they really get insights in what choices are our customers making. doing, and that's a good predictor for the trends they see 1 year later in the market. So it's input for their design and their assortment policy. And in short, it is all about turning the organization outside in or inside out, if you want. Making the customer the heart of your organization, and on a daily basis listen to what they are saying, what they are showing for behavior, and learn from it every day. That's important for an omni-channel operation, as it's very complex and very dynamic. And based on the voice of customer, the next step actually is to make a persona. So describe a very typical representative of your target group. What does he want? How is he behaving in relation to channels? What is he expecting from your propositions, etc.? That can be very helpful for your organization to map out. And is the starting point to get a better understanding of what does the customer journey of this target group look like. And just to give you an example of how that works, mapping the current situation actually is all about understanding what they are doing currently. And I give you an example of Shimano here. I did research for them throughout Europe in understanding their customers. They were very much aimed at the retailers and didn't know a lot about the behavior of the customers coming to those retailers. And we found out, based on the voice of customer, that, for instance, the journey for buying a bike and accessories is made up of 3 phases, as you see here. The orientation phase, for instance, when your bike is stolen and you need a new one, that's where it all starts, by that trigger. Then you have the purchase phase and the usage, as you see here. And within each of those phases, you see the blue blocks. And such a block is what you call a customer job. And a customer job is a concept that comes from Lean as well. And it means that it is a group of customer activities aimed at a specific goal. For instance, finding out if a certain bike you have selected fits your body well, if it rides nice. You have to find that out, and so you deploy activities to do so. And what we did for each and every of those blue blocks is look under the hood, so to say. So we went into it. You see the blue block coming up right now, and you see all the details behind it. You look at 3 aspects actually in mapping the current situation. You look at the activities that the customer is deploying. Then you are looking into where is he doing that. So those are the touch points connected to that activity. And then thirdly, you look into how is he experiencing that, also linked to the touch point and his activity. And based on what you know about how he is experiencing that, you can decide on, does this need improvement or not? And if yes, what will the improvement be? And this gives you insight in the current situation.
Okay, very specific and very well practical for our students, I guess. I have one more question about this.
Yeah.
You say a persona, a guy 45 years, for example, there.
Mm-hmm.
But you have segments. How many segments do you sketch as a persona, or does it depend, or is there a golden rule?
Yeah, both. It depends based on the specific circumstances of your market and your product and service, of course. But as a golden rule, I would say start with 2 personas, don't make any more. It's difficult enough to really understand that and map their journeys. And afterwards, when you are really optimizing on your omnichannel operation, you can become more specific and add some more personas and their journeys.
Okay, I think a good guideline for our students as well then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, then if you have the current situation, you have to think of a desired situation, a Zol situation, as you said.
Yeah.
How can they do that? And, well, how can they make it ambitious, but also realistic? They are working for real companies, so maybe students have the tendency to do big things, big ideas. What tips can you give to our students for creating a vision for the future, a Zol situation?
Yeah. Well, let's look into that. I'm showing that on this slide. Show you going from the east to the Zol situation. We just discussed how you can map the east, the current situation. And let's look into the Zol. And I have an example of an experience to look into.
Hey, just that, thanks.
You sure?
Yeah.
Username?
Nick M?
No.
NM 1983?
No.
Zandy Pops?
Sorry.
Zandy Pops?
No, okay. Don't worry, I'll help. What's your postcode?
Oh, it's GU749ZT.
Welcome back, Nick Forever. Please listen carefully to this bread license agreement before continuing with your purchase of a loaf of bread. If you do not, blah, blah, blah. You also agree not to use any bread-based products for any purposes prohibited by United Kingdom law, including without limitation, design, development, manufacture of missiles, chemical, nuclear or biological weapons.
Tick.
I'm afraid you've timed out.
What? Sorry. Hello? Excuse me. Oh, yeah, hey.
Just one loaf, sir.
Yeah, we just...
What's your username?
It's Nick Forever, but number 4, not the...
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to check that you're a real person. Could you say that for me?
It's not even a word.
Okay, how about this one?
You know what, forget it.
Or this one?
Hippo Potter Nice.
You're in.
Great, I'm in.
£8.85.
It's supposed to be 98 pence.
Plus express delivery.
What's that?
Oh, well, it's express delivery. It's fast. So there's, standard.
Standard.
Standard delivery, that's £4.99.
Why?
Bread insurance. You didn't untick the don't decline bread insurance option.
You know what, I think I'll risk it.
It is quite close to the sell-by date.
Don't care.
98 pence it is. If you want to pop back in 5 business days, it'll be ready for your collection.
Well, I need it now, obviously.
Oh, OK. You want the take-home today price? Well, that's £3.27.
You know what, I'm going to go.
Come back soon.
I won't.
Dear customers, this call will be closing in 10 minutes. Please proceed to checkout. Please proceed to checkout. Thank you.
Okay, what you see in this video, of course, that it's all about customer experience. And research indicates that 89% of companies are investing heavily in the coming 2 years to improve their customer experience. And that's also something that Steve Jobs has taught us. He said, well, as a technical company, the pitfall is that we are just discussing techniques and become very enthusiastic about that. And in the end, we think of, well, how can we make this relevant for the customer? But it should be the other way around, 180 degrees actually. We should start with the customer experience, and then if we know what the customer wants, we can think of technological solutions to make that happen. And so how does this relate to the future situation? Well, actually, you can use that customer experience to design how you would like your customers to interact in your omnichannel operations, within a certain channel or between channels. And a technique you can use there is storyboarding. So what you are doing is that if you have a certain interaction in a touch point, you are mapping that out in scenes. And for each scenes, you are literally describing what is our customer seeing, what is he hearing, what is he reading, what is he experiencing. And those really concrete factors, those are the items that you have to improve upon. So based on the current situation, you have some improvement ideas. Based on mapping, designing the future interaction experience, you also have improvement ideas. And then the next step is, what are we going to do? And you can help your organization in mapping all those ideas in this matrix. The one axis is about impact. How important is this actually for our customers in terms of, for instance, speed or quality or pricing or whatever? and that can be low or high. And the other axis is about effort. How much money and time will it cost our organization to make this happen? And based on those two criteria, you can give each idea a spot in this matrix. And then you can go and prioritize them. What is the one I should start with? Well, of course, the ones that have highest impact and lowest effort. And then on and on until all your ideas have disappeared from this matrix.
Okay, yeah, interesting, because what I heard on one seminar is that companies used to strive to score a 9 out of 10, but that is very expensive. So for that matter, this high impact and low effort quadrant is very good.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah,
it's very practical.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Well, our students, they will start their project. What is always nice to have is a best practice example. So you can maybe transfer that best practice maybe to your own situation. Do you have a best practice example for us?
Yeah, I can give you some examples from practice. Probably you will be familiar with the company called Suit Supply. In the beginning of 2016, they won the European Award for their omnichannel strategy. And if you look more into that, that award was based on the fact that they really have a good integration between offline and online. So for instance, if you're buying online, you immediately get a message from the offline channels if you want to have the suit tailored to your measures, we can send someone over, or you can go to the nearest shop. And on the other hand, once you're in the shop and you buy something there that's out of stock, they can help you using an iPad and log in on your own account, see what are your sizes, have that delivered to your home the next day for free, etc., etc. So they really integrate that in a very professional way. And based on the success factors we saw earlier on, you can imagine how difficult that is to realize, even though it doesn't sound probably too shocking what they are doing, but it's really complex. And another example is Achmea, Dutch insurance organizations. A daughter of them, FBTO, really looks very deeply into the online journeys of their customers. So if you're visiting their website, they use software called Now Interact. And what they do is prediction based on your click behavior. And they have certain personas of behavior that they see very often using the 80-20 rule. And the software can decide to do three things. Either they let you go on the website based on your behavior because they think, well, the outcome will be positive. The second one is that they can adapt dynamically the pages on the website to give you a little push towards what they want. For instance, a 10% rebate if you close an insurance product now. And the third one is that they show you a pop-up and they ask you, can we help you? And if so, do you want to do it by chat or by phone? And in the last situation, if you leave your number, you'll be in contact within 1 minute with someone of the offline channels from the contact center. And they start a discussion with you based on the question, where can we help you with? And they do a lot of A/B testing on that. And the results are that people really get very satisfied based on the attention they are being given. And the other aspect is that this company improves their conversion rates with about 40% compared to the traditional situation. And lastly, an example from practice, that's what Peapod, an online grocery and also active in the offline world, of course, is doing in a very funny way. You can download an app on your smartphone, and they have placed these walls on the public transport buildings. And once you're waiting to go to your work or return to home after work, for instance, that seems to be the moment for most consumers to think of, oh, well, I have to do my grocery shopping, etc. And you can scan the products that are here, and in the really urban regions, they are able to offer you that once you step out of the train, for instance, on that spot, you have your groceries there in a bag, and so they integrate the offline and online world.
Okay, thanks. These are examples of business to consumer,
Right.
mainly. Business to business, do you also have an example, or is that more difficult, or not so top of mind with business to business companies?
I think that's the last point you're mentioning. It's as relevant for business to business markets as it is for business to consumer markets.
Yeah.
But I see that consumer companies are going faster in their omnichannel approach than the business to business companies are. But they are making good steps as well.
Yeah. Because a customer is a customer, also a B2B customer.
Yeah.
And he also has an experience which you can optimize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also because most of the people that are buying in a business role, they are consumers as well, of course, in private. So their expectations they have there, they project it on their business environment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Well, then you have, for example, in your consultancy experience, top management or managers, well, they are very enthusiastic about your advice, but then you have to implement it. Mm-hmm. What I read and hear is that implementing a change is very difficult, can be very difficult. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah. Actually, I can, and to do so, I just want to go back to some insights on, for instance, Nokia. Well, as we all know, that does not exist anymore. While in 2000 it was one of the biggest companies in the world, very successful in mobile phones, and they missed the opportunity of the introduction of smartphones and left that to Apple and Samsung, of course. And the case studies that have been made indicate that Nokia had become so big, so successful, that they weren't adaptive anymore. They did not understand well enough anymore what their customers wanted and how that was changing and how they had to adapt to that. And that's something that you see in nature as well. Darwin already found out 150 years ago that it's all about being able to adapt to circumstances and adapt to changes in those circumstances. And there are a lot of companies that have failed on that matter. For instance, Kodak, 130,000 employees 20 years ago, inventor of the digital photography, and they do not exist anymore as well as Nokia does. So you see a lot of dynamics actually in the markets. Here, for instance, you see companies listed on the Fortune 500, and they studied all those listings, and what became clear is that in a 10-year period, about 50% of those companies disappear from that list because they become less successful, other companies become more successful, and there are lots of dynamics in their markets. And you can denote that by using what they call the VUCA level. That's all about how volatile is the market, how uncertain is it complex, is it ambiguous, and that level is actually increasing, and so it becomes more and more difficult for organizations to do long-term planning. And based on that, we see that the success factor for most companies is to have as short a time to market as possible. Learning faster from your customers than your competitors do is a very important factor in becoming the winner in tomorrow's market. There are a lot of changes going on. And they come from different angles, for instance at the macro level or in your market with new entrants there or technological developments. And you see that companies are using agile techniques in their marketing approach. And I'm not going to go into detail on all those principles you see here, but what it's all about is really follow the customer centricity approach. So put your customer in the middle as, for instance, using the voice of customer we just saw, but also work in integrated multidisciplinary teams and work in short periods on small improvements. And that's something that's really suitable for omnichannel operations as they are very complex and very dynamic. And it doesn't work to write thick plans for 2-year periods, for instance, but you should start anywhere and go and improve from that point in little steps. And companies that are actually deploying agile, they report back very positive figures on, for instance, the improvement of their time to market. And well, that agile aspect is also what you see in the book, in the PDCA cycle. And you just, well, think of an improvement you want to deploy in practice. Just do it. Evaluate if it's been a success or not and adapt to that, and you go on and on. And it's all about taking small steps. And in doing so, what you should get accustomed to is that you should follow the ceteris paribus approach there. So just isolate one variable, keep all the others constant, and for instance by using an A/B test, just find out if that change you've made is changing the customer behavior, for instance improving their customer satisfaction or whatever. And if you do that, also please be aware that you apply the 80-20 rule. So as we saw in the matrix about impact and effort, just focus in the small steps you're taking on those ideas that really have the largest impact on your customers. And all the details will come later. And that brings me to implement that omnichannel and the do's and don'ts. Well, actually 4 points to keep in mind. As I already mentioned, start with the voice of customer. I can't stress that enough. Based on that, perhaps you can design a persona if you would like that, and map its current journey and design the future state, the Soul and the East situation. Really stick to taking small steps. Don't do too big changes as they cost too much time, and once you're finished, chances are that the customers are not expecting that from you, or their behavior has already changed again. And as a fourth point, use a process by which you are focusing on continuous improvement. So make a plan, get it to practice, evaluate if it works, and then go on and on. And that makes you a really intelligent organization.
Okay, thanks. And then basically that's the contents of it, but the people side, the people in a call center or in a web care team, how can you change their behavior? What can you do? Because you want them to change, but how can you make them change?
Yeah, well, I think the starting point for that is to include them in your work in terms of have them give input on developing a persona or mapping out the current customer journeys or thinking about designing the future experience you want to offer to your customers. Co-create with them. That makes them involved. And secondly, you should also get their attention in terms of, what are we rewarding them for? Is that just for their small aspect within their own channel, or is that more broadly for the whole journey? And it also helps to have them work sometimes in multidisciplinary teams, so they understand what other departments are doing with their channels and cooperate with them and exchange ideas for better cooperation, etc.
Okay, thanks. Then last question. Are there any do's and don'ts that you want to share for students when you do such a trajectory, such a project?
Yeah, well, actually, that's some of them are on this slide, and I think most importantly is the big pitfall is to write thick plans and start projects that last for about half a year, for instance, but just make it very practical, very concrete, make small steps, and the advantage of that is that you can make quick wins, the low-hanging fruit. And based on the success you have there, you immediately get your attention and people want to be part of a success, so budgets become available more freely and you get a lot of support from the organization to make your changes. People have to go through pain, so to say, to change their behavior towards an omnichannel behavior. Yeah. And success is something that's really facilitating that.
Yeah.
So
incremental change,
yeah.
Small steps. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.